they said she crossed the line? A woman in her late 20s, scissors in hand, had just given a struggling veteran something more valuable than gold, a small piece of dignity. For that, she was fired. The story spread fast. You fired her for helping a veteran? Shame on you! The words rippled through the town, whispered first as gossip, then shouted as outrage. Kelly, the hairstylist at the center of it all, never imagined her compassion would spark a chain of events that would alter her life, and the life of an entire community. That morning had begun like any other. Kelly unlocked the doors of the salon she'd worked at for years, the kind of place that hummed with chatter, where locals came not only to get their hair trimmed but to feel seen. She was no stranger to long days filled with blow-dryers, laughter, and the subtle intimacy of listening to people's troubles while she worked. But what happened that day would draw a line in the sand between kindness and greed, between human dignity and the cold pursuit of profit. The story of Kelly begins in a small American town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name, and secrets rarely lasted more than a day. In such towns, reputations were currency, and a single act, good or bad, could ripple through every street, every diner, every Sunday church pew. Kelly had already earned her reputation. She was the stylist who remembered not just her customers' names, but their children's birthdays. The one who made people laugh when they sat in her chair, who sent them back into the world not just looking better, but feeling lighter. In places like this, small acts of kindness mattered. They were noticed, remembered, and magnified. And then there was Jason, a veteran in his 40s, known to nearly everyone, but not in the way he once had been. He had served with pride, worn the uniform with dignity, and for a time had been seen as the town's hero. But years after returning home, the man who had once stood tall now carried himself in fragments. His clothes hung loose, his beard unkempt, his eyes shadowed by battles fought both overseas and within his own mind. To outsiders, his story might have looked simple: a man unable to adjust after service, abandoned by his wife, slipping through the cracks. But to those who had known him in his youth, Jason was a walking reminder of how quickly life can unravel when society forgets its heroes. When Kelly crossed paths with him that morning, she made a choice so instinctive it hardly seemed like a choice at all. She bought him a cup of coffee. She offered him a haircut on the house. To her, it was nothing more than a gesture of decency. To Jason, it was a lifeline. But to her employer, Sydney, it was an unforgivable violation of business. What happened next would ignite the town. Within hours, Kelly's private act of kindness became the public scandal everyone was talking about. From the corner stores to the mayor's office, from the hair dryers in the salon to the pews in Sunday service, the question hung heavy in the air. What kind of community punishes kindness? The answer was not simple. And the story of what unfolded is not just about Kelly or Jason, but about the fragile balance between profit and humanity, and how a single haircut revealed the soul of a town. Kelly's story didn't begin in the salon where she would one day face her greatest trial. It began years earlier, in a modest household filled with arguments over the future. From the moment she was old enough to hold a brush, Kelly had been fascinated by the power of transformation, how a new hairstyle could lift a person's spirit, how beauty could give someone the courage to face the world differently. Her parents, however, saw none of that. To them, scissors and curling irons were toys, not tools of a serious career. Her father in particular carried ambitions forged in a different era. An engineer himself, he believed stability came only from hard sciences and respected degrees. And the elderly came not just for trims but for conversation, often staying long after the blow-dryer had cooled. In the quiet moments between clients, Kelly still dreamed. She wanted her own salon one day, not a franchise empire, but a place where people felt safe, seen, and maybe even healed a little. A place where kindness was policy, not a weakness. But dreams, no matter how radiant, often exist in the shadow of conflict. And in Kelly's life, That shadow was cast by one woman, Sydney, her boss. Sydney ran Mara's salon with an iron fist and a cash register for a heart. To her, a haircut was not an act of connection, but a transaction. Customers were numbers, employees were tools. And kindness, especially the kind that didn't bring in profit, was a liability. Sydney didn't see the way Kelly lifted spirits, or how customers lingered just to chat. She only saw hours and dollars. And as much as Kelly loved her work, she sometimes wondered, how long could two philosophies, compassion versus greed, exist under the same roof before one consumed the other? That question was answered the day she met Jason at the coffee stand. Kelly's life and choices cannot be separated from the place where she lived. Her town was small enough that no one could remain anonymous for long. It was the kind of community where neighbors waved from porches, where gossip traveled faster than the morning paper, and where reputations mattered as much as, or even more than, money. Nestled between rolling fields and a two-lane highway, the town carried a rhythm of its own. On weekdays, people didn't just come for a haircut, they came for Kelly. She was, unknowingly, the quiet pillar holding Sydney's business together. This fragile balance between heart and profit reflected the town itself. Here, people valued both survival and kindness. They respected hard work, but they also cherished decency. The one they had applauded when he left for service, the one they praised as a hero. But when he returned, the parades were gone, and the long war he carried within himself had no audience. In towns like this, where everyone's business eventually became public knowledge, Jason lived in the uncomfortable spotlight of collective memory. People remembered his glory, pitied his downfall, and whispered about his struggles. He was a symbol, once a reminder of sacrifice, now a mirror of what could happen when the world forgets its veterans. And so, to get back to normal. And when he didn't, when the shadows of his service followed him into civilian life, they looked away. Jason found himself caught in an invisible war. Nights were restless, haunted by memories he couldn't shake. Days were long, filled with the struggle to find steady work. Some employers turned him away because of his unpredictable behavior. Others simply didn't have patience for someone who sometimes froze at sudden noises or needed time alone to steady himself. Bills piled up. Friendships thinned out. Pride kept him from asking for help, but hunger had no patience for pride. By the time he walked into the coffee stand that morning, Jason was already living on the edge. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands rough from odd jobs. He kept his head down, avoiding the curious glances he knew would come. When it was his turn at the counter, the way his hand lingered over the last few coins as if parting with them was harder than speaking. Without drawing attention, she rang up his coffee and quietly covered the difference herself. "Don't worry about it," she said softly, sliding the cup toward him. "It's on the house today." Jason looked at her, surprised. He wasn't used to kindness anymore, not the real kind. The kind without strings. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude. Recognition. Human connection. But in a town like theirs, acts of quiet compassion didn't always go unnoticed. And Sydney, who happened to be nearby, had seen the entire exchange. She didn't see a struggling veteran. She didn't see the weight of unspoken battles or the dignity Jason still tried to hold on to. All she saw was a man she considered bad for business. And Kelly, by offering him grace, had just crossed an invisible line Sydney never allowed her employees to touch. The consequences would come faster than Kelly could ever imagine. The very next morning, before the sun had fully risen over the town, Kelly arrived at work early as she always did. The shop was quiet, the faint hum of machines filling the air as she prepared the counters for the morning rush. She was lost in the rhythm of routine when the front door swung open with a sharp chime. It wasn't a customer. It was Sydney. The officer's uniform was crisp, his badge catching the first rays of sunlight that streamed through the window. He didn't smile, didn't greet her. He simply stood in the doorway, shoulders squared, radiating authority. Kelly froze. The warmth of the shop seemed to drop several degrees. "Morning," Sidney said flatly, his tone more like a warning than a greeting. He stepped inside, his boots clicking against the floor. "We need to have a word." Kelly nodded cautiously, drying her hands with a rag. "Of course." "What's this about?" Sidney's gaze was hard, unblinking. "It's about yesterday. Don't think I didn't notice what you did. Serving him." Kelly's heart skipped. She didn't need to ask who him was. Jason. Sidney leaned on the counter, his voice low, deliberate. "Men like him, they bring trouble. I've seen it before. They walk into a place, and before long, everyone else walks out. Bad reputation sticks, you know? This is a good business you've got here. Would be a shame if it got dragged down." It wasn't just advice. It was a threat wrapped in a smile that never reached his eyes. Kelly tried to steady her breathing. "He just wanted a coffee. That's all." Sidney shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Folks around here trust me to keep this town safe. And part of that is making sure we don't encourage the wrong kind of people." His words lingered, heavy with implication. He didn't need to say more. The message was clear: serving Jason, or face consequences. Kelly gripped the rag in her hand tightly. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Most people would have nodded, agreed, and quietly obeyed. That's what Sidney expected. But Kelly wasn't most people. Though her voice trembled slightly, her resolve didn't. "With all due respect, officer, everyone deserves kindness. A cup of coffee doesn't hurt anyone." For the first time, Sidney's expression hardened, the mask of polite authority cracking. He straightened, towering over her, his shadow stretching across the counter. "You don't want to make enemies in this town, miss," he said coldly. "Take my advice. Stay in line." Then, without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingling softly behind him. The shop felt emptier than before. Kelly stood frozen, her heart pounding, knowing she had just been marked. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Sidney's warning was only the beginning. The real test of her courage was yet to come. As Kelly unlocked the salon doors that morning, she couldn't shake the memory of Jason's tired eyes at the coffee stand. He had carried himself with the weight of the world, yet there had been a flicker of hope when she offered him a cup of coffee. It was a small gesture, but she knew sometimes small gestures meant more than grandiose acts of charity. With the salon quiet and the air still warm from the rising sun, she found herself thinking, why not do a little more? Why not give Jason a haircut, on the house, not because it was easy, but because it was right? Later that morning, as the town stirred awake, he had not expected to be treated with such generosity. The world had often been cold to him. Yet, here was Kelly, a young woman who saw him as a person first, not a statistic or a cautionary tale. "Jason!" Kelly called warmly as she spotted him. "Come on in. I've got a chair ready for you." Jason hesitated, pride and shyness colliding. You really don't have to. I've already had coffee." "That's enough." Kelly waved him off with a confident smile. "I insist. Sit. It's on me." It was an invitation that carried more than the promise of a haircut. It was a restoration of dignity. A signal that someone still saw value in him beyond his mistakes or misfortunes. As Jason sat down, the familiar scent of shampoo and styling products filled his senses. And for the first time in years, he felt lighter, not just physically, but emotionally. His face, once clouded with the shadows of his struggles, began to regain the sharpness and definition of the man the town had once admired. It was a quiet revolution, happening strand by strand. Kelly didn't just cut hair, she rebuilt confidence. One snip at a time. Each stroke of the scissors was a gentle assertion that the world still had room for him, that he had not been forgotten. But as she worked, every gesture of care Kelly offered Jason. To her, this was not kindness, it was recklessness. To her, generosity without profit was a crime, and she intended to make Kelly pay for it. And so, the small act of compassion that should have been invisible, private, and tender, was about to ignite a firestorm that no one in that small town could ignore. Kelly had just finished trimming Jason's hair, carefully shaping the edges of his beard, when Sydney stepped fully into the salon. The air seemed to thicken instantly, the hum of the hair dryers fading into the background. Sydney's presence carried the authority of someone used to getting her way, and making sure everyone around her knew it. Is he paying for this? The town remained unaware of the storm that was about to descend. A simple act of generosity, a haircut given freely, had turned into a catalyst, a moment that would test the values of every person who called this small town home. As Kelly stepped out of the salon, her bag in hand and a heavy weight on her shoulders, whispers began to ripple through the street like wind through dry leaves. People who had been passing by noticed Jason lingering outside, his usual quiet demeanor replaced with a visible shadow of sadness and frustration. "What happened?" a woman asked gently, approaching him. Her voice carried concern rather than curiosity. Jason sighed, his eyes distant. "The nice lady at the salon, she gave me a free haircut, and her boss fired her for it." The words struck the small gathering like lightning. Kelly remained unaware of the storm building beyond its walls. She moved slowly, tidying up strands of hair, trying to collect herself after the confrontation with Sydney. Standing tall at the entrance was the mayor, flanked by Jason, who had come back to support her. Behind them, a crowd of townspeople had begun to gather, their numbers swelling as curiosity and indignation converged. The energy was palpable, a wave of collective support ready to crash against the cold wall of Sydney's authority. Kelly froze, her eyes wide. She hadn't expected anyone to show up, let alone the mayor himself. The sight of Jason beside him reminded her why she had acted in the first place. And now, standing at the threshold of what could be a turning point, Kelly realized that the town itself might just correct the wrong that had been done. The small act of kindness that had been punished was about to become a moment of reckoning, one that would test not only Sydney's grip on her business but the heart of the entire community. The mayor stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. His voice, calm but firm, cut through the murmurs like a bell. "Kelly," he began, looking directly at her, "is it true that your boss fired you because you gave Mr. Jason here a free haircut?" Kelly's eyes flicked to Sydney, who was standing rigidly, her expression a mix of irritation and disbelief. He handed Kelly a certificate of recognition, its edges crisp and official, symbolizing more than just acknowledgement. It was a public validation of her values. Alongside it, a large white envelope caught her attention. Inside was a financial gift substantial enough to help her realize a dream she had held close for years. Kelly's hands trembled as she accepted them. The recognition, the gift, the presence of Jason and the townspeople, it was overwhelming. Tears pricked at her eyes, but a smile broke across her face, radiant and sincere. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just for her skills as a stylist, but for the humanity she had chosen to uphold. The mayor paused for a moment, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "Let this be a reminder," he said, "that the true currency of life is not money, but the kindness we give and receive. Invest wisely." As Kelly posed for photos with the mayor, the envelope heavy in her hands, she realized that the town's response was more than just support, it was a declaration. It was proof that her actions, however small they might seem in the grand scheme, had the power to ripple outward, to affect lives in ways she could never have predicted. Sydney, meanwhile, stood frozen. Provided the perfect foundation to finally open her own salon, a place that would embody her values and vision. In the weeks that followed, Kelly poured herself into planning every detail. The salon wasn't just about haircuts or styling, it was a sanctuary, designed to make anyone who walked through the door feel seen and valued. She chose soft, welcoming colors, arranged the chairs to foster conversation, and stocked products that were both high quality and accessible. Every mirror reflected not just the customer's face, but a commitment to care and dignity. Word spread quickly. People who had once been loyal to Mara's began to visit Kelly's new salon, eager to support the young stylist who had been unjustly fired. Meanwhile, Sydney's salon faced a sharp decline. The customers who had once sustained her business were now loyal to Kelly, not because of superior service, but because of a deeper connection, a connection Sydney had dismissed as irrelevant. Without her primary clientele, Sydney's salon struggled, and eventually, she was forced to close its doors. The lesson was stark and unavoidable. Compassion and integrity were currencies that could outlast greed and indifference. Kelly, in contrast, had proven that generosity could be a catalyst for transformation, not just for those who received it, but for those who gave it. Jason, too, found new stability in his life, buoyed by the renewed sense of community and respect. His once fragmented existence began to mend, strand by strand, much like the hair that Kelly had so carefully styled for him. In the end, Kelly's story became more than just a tale of a haircut or a fired stylist. It became a testament to the enduring power of kindness, the courage to act with integrity, and the profound effect one person can have when they choose to stand by their principles, even in the face of injustice. The town remembered her not merely as a talented stylist. It reminded everyone that compassion could inspire change, not just in the lives of the recipient, but in the community as a whole. Local businesses took note as well. Several shop owners, inspired by Kelly's example, started offering small acts of generosity, discounted meals for struggling families, free tutoring for children, or simple gestures that communicated care rather than profit. What began as one small act blossomed into a culture of thoughtfulness that the town had not experienced in years. Jason. Their popularity fueled not just by her skill but by the story she embodied. Every customer who walked in was reminded that a business could be both successful and kind. Her motivation had always been simple: to help, to care, and to honor the dignity of those around her. And in the end, that quiet integrity became the force that reshaped an entire community. Proving that even small acts, when rooted in genuine compassion, can grow into something extraordinary. Months passed, and Kelly's story continued to inspire. Newspapers featured her journey, not as a sensational tale of a fired stylist, but as a study in courage, empathy, and resilience. The certificate from the mayor became more than a symbol of recognition. Even years later, newcomers to the town would hear the story of Kelly, the stylist who refused to compromise her humanity. Her salons remained thriving hubs of service and goodwill. And those who knew her story understood that her influence went far beyond hairstyles. It was about the courage to stand for what is right. For Sydney, the lesson came too late. Her business had closed permanently, a stark reminder that disregard for ethics and humanity can erode even long-held authority. Meanwhile, Kelly's name became synonymous with integrity, compassion, and the enduring truth that true success is measured not by money, but by the lives we touch. The story of Kelly and Jason reminds us all, in a world often focused on transactions, people who had been passive bystanders in the past began stepping forward to make small changes in their own lives. A local teacher organized a program to mentor struggling youth. Inspired by Kelly's compassion for Jason, shopkeepers offered free services to those in need, and community members formed informal support networks to assist veterans and others facing hardship. The story also reached local media outlets, amplifying its impact. Journalists highlighted Kelly's courage, framing it not just as a personal victory but as a moral lesson for the entire region. Her focus stayed on her craft and the people she served. Yet, through her actions, she had created an enduring legacy, a community more aware, more compassionate, and more willing to stand up for what is right. While Kelly's life and business flourished, Sydney faced the consequences of her rigid, profit-focused mindset. Initially, Sydney tried to implement discounts and promotions to lure customers back, but the trust she had lost was far more valuable than any coupon. The town had made its choice. Kelly's reputation as a talented stylist with a heart for people had triumphed over Sydney's narrow focus on profit. Even longtime patrons who had remained indifferent to Sydney's demeanor saw the difference clearly. A sense of fairness and moral accountability had reshaped loyalties. This period became a turning point for Sydney personally, though not one she had anticipated. She was forced to confront the consequences of her actions, or inaction, and the realization that authority and business acumen alone were insufficient to sustain relationships or earn respect. Though she could not undo the damage, the lesson was indelibly clear: cruelty and greed are ultimately self-defeating, while empathy and integrity create enduring value. Meanwhile, Kelly's salons expanded steadily. The success was not just measured in profits, but in community engagement, trust, and shared respect. Every new client was a testament to the power of moral courage. And every appointment reinforced the town's understanding that kindness, even when challenged, could yield tangible and lasting rewards. In the end, Sydney's downfall underscored a timeless truth. In a society, as in life, people remember actions more than words, and character more than titles. Kelly had proven that the currency of kindness was far more powerful than any ledger of money. Kelly's journey became a story that the town would tell for generations. Her simple act of giving a free haircut to Jason had grown into a narrative about courage, integrity. Her salons became more than just businesses. They were symbols of what a community could achieve when empathy guided actions. But lifting them up, veterans and those struggling found spaces where they were recognized and supported, echoing the initial moment that had sparked it all. Jason, too, to flourish. The haircut that Kelly had offered became a metaphor for restoration, of pride, of confidence, and of hope. His engagement with community programs inspired other veterans to seek help and reconnect with civilian life, proving that a single compassionate act could catalyze broader social change. Kelly herself never sought accolades, but her story garnered recognition at multiple levels, from local media to civic organizations. Yet she remained grounded, focusing on her work, mentoring staff, and continuing to serve her community. Her philosophy was clear: success was not measured solely in wealth, but in the lives touched and the dignity preserved. The contrast with Sydney remained a cautionary tale. The former salon owner, despite her skills, could not recover from the alienation her harshness had caused. Her closure symbolized the principle that ethical leadership, grounded in empathy, ultimately trumps authority enforced through fear. In the end, Kelly's tale is timeless. True currency is not in material wealth but in the generosity of spirit. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, can change destinies, inspire communities, and create legacies that endure far longer than any business or paycheck. The story of a young stylist and a struggling veteran reminds us all that courage and compassion, when acted upon, can ripple outward to touch countless lives. Kelly's story became more than a local anecdote. It evolved into a blueprint for ethical living and community engagement. Schools began incorporating her story into lessons about empathy, moral courage, and social responsibility. Students were encouraged to consider how small acts of kindness could impact not only individuals but entire communities. Local businesses also learned from Kelly's example. Service providers, shop owners, and restaurateurs began experimenting with initiatives that prioritized people over profit. Loyalty programs were infused with genuine care. Discounts and charitable efforts became meaningful rather than superficial. And the town slowly transformed into a place where integrity and generosity were celebrated alongside skill and professionalism. Kelly herself remained a guiding figure in this evolving culture. She mentored young stylists not only in cutting and coloring hair but in understanding the human stories behind every client. Her staff learned that attention to detail, patience, and empathy were as vital as technique. Her salons became safe spaces where every visitor felt respected, valued, and heard, demonstrating that business success and moral responsibility were not mutually exclusive. Meanwhile, Jason's life d its upward trajectory. His confidence restored. He took on leadership roles in veteran support programs and shared his story to inspire others facing similar challenges. The haircut that had seemed so simple became a symbolic starting point for his renewed sense of purpose, and his gratitude toward Kelly remained profound and enduring. The townspeople often reflected on the difference one individual could make. Kelly's actions demonstrated that ethical courage and generosity could ripple outward in ways that exceeded expectations, influencing societal norms, business practices, and community cohesion. Her story illustrated that standing up for kindness, despite risk or opposition, could redefine the values of an entire community. As Kelly's salons d to expand, the legacy she created became a guiding principle for the town. Her life exemplified the enduring truth that wealth is measured not in money, but in the positive impact one has on others. The story of Kelly and Jason remained a testament to the power of human decency, inspiring generations to come. Years later, Kelly's influence could still be felt across the town. Her salons had become institutions, not just for beauty, but for community connection. Every chair held stories of hope, resilience, and compassion, reminders of the moment when one young stylist's generosity had sparked a chain reaction of goodwill. The town itself had changed. Acts of kindness became more visible, and people were more willing to help one another without expecting anything in return. Kelly's example showed that true leadership was not about authority or wealth, but about the choices one makes when confronted with moral challenges. Jason, now fully reintegrated into civilian life, often visited Kelly's salons, not just for haircuts, but to offer guidance and support to others. He worked with local organizations to assist veterans, and his story inspired countless people to persevere, highlighting the long-term impact of even a single act of empathy. Even newcomers to the town heard of Kelly's legacy. Parents shared the story with their children, emphasizing the value of courage, generosity, and integrity. Her salons were more than businesses. They were living examples of how one person's actions could reshape a community's culture. As for Sydney, the memory of her failed business lingered as a cautionary tale. It reminded everyone that short-sightedness and cruelty could never withstand the collective judgment of a conscientious community. Kelly's story proved that while power and money can control resources, it is kindness and integrity that earn loyalty, respect, and enduring influence. Ultimately, Kelly's tale serves as a universal lesson. Small acts of generosity, guided by courage and moral conviction, can transform lives, inspire communities, and create a legacy that outlasts any challenge or obstacle. The ripple effect of one haircut, one act of compassion, had become a timeless narrative about the power of human kindness and the enduring value of doing what is right.